Um, well, I feel like I need to buy a car wash. Thanks, Robert. Look, I think it's not so much a matter of if Australia follows the US trends. It's more a matter of when. And that was a great presentation for me, and I hope everybody here enjoyed it. Thank you. Our next presenter this morning is Eric Wulf. Eric's obviously from the ICA. People probably know him well. Eric will be with us for about 35 minutes, and I'm simply going to hand over to him and allow him to take us through the next session. Thank you.
Here we go, okay. Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for being a part of this on day two. Per Doug's introduction, my name is Eric Wulf with the ICA. Thanks for having us here, our team, and several of the Americans. Hopefully we haven't worn out our welcome. In some cases, we probably have, but hopefully not all of us. We're excited about this partnership with the Australian Car Wash Association, and I want to thank, it may be my technology here, right? Do I need to get behind the microphone? Now that's live. Okay, sorry. This being the first coordinated and partnered Car Wash Show Australia, just want to say thanks to the entire board of directors and the staff, and Fiona and Doug in particular for the great job they've done with this. We're really excited about 2 years from now about going to the Gold Coast with you all and having this be a long-term partnership, so thanks for all the future we see together. I also hope, if you don't mind, I'm going to take just a minute, because I'm an association guy, not just in the car wash space, right? So I want to share with you just a thought on this partnership for those of you who are members of these organizations. On the way down here, I read an interesting book, at least for me. There's a US Senator named Ben Sasse who just wrote a book called Them, and the tagline of the book is something like, why do we hate each other and what should we do? And I come from a country that's going through a lot of freaking challenges right now, and a lot of angry people doing stupid stuff. And one of the several premises in the book is that because of changes in technology and changes in ways that we work, that communities and the ties that bind us are breaking down. Everything from houses of worship to where we live in the neighborhoods and how much more transient we are. We move around the country more. Anyway, as I'm reading this and it's diagnosing all of these problems, and I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, there's an opportunity for associations. And I think about the people that we've met, that I've had the privilege of meeting, and the friendships that I've had the privilege of creating with folks in Australia and in Europe and around the US, and how thankful I am for those. I mean, it's great to wash cars, but we also have lives, and we like to connect with one another and have real relationships. And so I'm just thankful for the chance to do these kinds of events. Anyway, that's my non-political, but just a moment of esoteric philosophy. If you give me the indulgence, I appreciate it. Okay, I've got 35 minutes approximately to go through what we're excited to present, being the first Australian car wash study. I'm going to hopefully have a couple of minutes for Q&A afterwards. If not, I'm here the rest of the day and through tonight, so I'm happy to share the information with you or answer questions at that point. Let me start off by saying we are in a bit of a golden age, I believe, in car washing. Here are things happening all over the world that are really positive for us. Number one is we have rising incomes, and one of the outgrowths of rising incomes is greater automobile ownership all across the world. Number two is with the income also is the rise in discretionary income. So people are using that discretionary income for all sorts of do-it-for-me activities. So this move about DIY, when you see that, do it yourself, the move to DIFM, do it for me, you see that manifesting in all sorts of different industries, service industries, and particularly in the car wash space. Number three is you see these rising living standards, and what happens with rising living standards and affluence is this drive for cleanliness, and that includes our vehicles, and we're benefiting from that, of course. Number four is the rising costs of labor, and that pushes automation. And then number 5 is the increasing proficiency, meaning we're getting a lot better at washing cars. The cars are coming out better. The end product is better. The customers are happy, and that means profitability for the operator. It also means truly creating a car wash industry. What has gone from sometimes a practice that was on the sidelines or in the shadows and still is in certain parts of the world has now truly become a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world. So all good stuff for the car wash industry. And you can, what's other corollaries and things you can look at? Well, you can look at the number of cars. This is looking at the number of cars, passenger vehicles only, divided by the number of inhabitants in these different geographic areas. The short of it is it's all good. And what's interesting, I think, about this is the more mature car wash markets, I would consider the North American, well, at least Canada and US and also European markets being very mature. You'll see that actually bleed through to some of the consumer study data. The area of the world growing fastest in automobile ownership is the Oceania. They throw Australia into that world on this graph, but the entire world is moving toward more cars, which is good, we think, for the long term for the industry. Of course, we can blow up economies pretty well, as we all saw about 9 years ago, so let's not say that it'll go on forever perfectly in a straight line and up, but the trends are good. Okay, so about the consumer study, we've been doing these in the US since 1996. We do them every 3 years. And the reason for that is consumer behavior doesn't change dramatically month to month or even year to year. So 3 years is a pretty good trend line we have felt to get some really good longitudinal data. We just added a European study in 2017 we released last year, and then this is the first Australian study. So I don't have longitudinal data, of course, but over time we hope to build those out. We do one study every year for these 3 markets. So the best I can do today is compare those. I can't give you all the history. And what we're going to focus on is 4 areas. Number 1 is incidence, which means what's the percentage of folks who do it themselves or are professional car washers, and there's shades of gray in between that. There are people who switch back and forth. We're going to focus on value, so what do people want from their car wash, and importantly, what will they pay for that they want. The third is the barriers. Why don't they wash more often? And then the final one is differentiation. That really speaks to why do they pick one car wash over the other. I'm also going to tell you that through all of the slides I'm going to show you, keep in mind this is self-reported data. So we went out to 1,000 consumers via an online survey in the month of May in Australia. They had to own, lease, or have a company car provided for them. That was the qualifier. They had to be over 18 years of age. That's how we got them into the sample pool. But this is what people think. This is how many times they think they wash their car. This is what they think they want. And if any of you are amateur psychologists or amateur researchers or professional otherwise, you know that your self-declared beliefs of what your motivators are don't always match exactly your habits. Okay, so temper what you see with that knowledge. Okay, so what I'll cover is going to be high-level Australia, meaning I'm not going to go into every nuanced portion of our research study. There's a 218-page PowerPoint deck that's been provided to the Australian Car Wash Association that you will have access to as well. I can't go through the whole thing today. I'm mostly also going to focus on the professional results. That means those people who say that they most frequently wash at a professional car wash. As I list here on the things that are left out, I don't talk as much about the DIY. I don't talk about the non. The non is people who don't wash their car, the great unwashed. You don't even want to look at these folks. We're not going to spend any time on them today. They're typically, the good news is it's a very small percentage of the whole. You almost can't move them. You almost can't do anything to get them to wash a car. We're going to ignore them today. And then we'll do some comparisons to the US and to Europe. But these other components here, unlimited plans, I'm not going to get deep into today. Vehicle safety features is an increasing issue. I'm not going to get into that today, but it is available in the report. If you are awake and present at the end of this presentation, odds are maybe half of you will be. There will be a little URL prize at the end. I'm going to give you a website address. You can go and actually download the study yourself. This is going to be another summary document. The full document you'll need to go to Fiona or Doug for after the show. So, okay, enough qualifiers. Here's a single slide trying to give you the most summary of what we discovered in our survey. Number one is 96% of Australians wash their car. That's great. Only 4% are the great unwashed. So that's the good news. Now, this is every kind of washing. This is, I did it myself, I went to a professional car wash, everybody. But at least one time this year, they wash their car. Okay, that's good. Number two is the average annual pro wash frequency. So the folks who most frequently, for those who wash, they believe they're washing 10.6 times per year. Okay, they think that. Now, I will tell you that this idea of wash frequency is one that is, there's a couple data points you can use. One is what consumers say how often they wash. The other is you can look at site data. And in the US, I'm aware of several folks who have done credit card transaction analysis to look at how often do car wash customers come to their site. That number will suggest the majority of customers will come 3 times or less per year to your store. Now, they think they're washing 11 times a year nearly, right? Let's say that they come 3 times in Australia. They think they're washing 11 times a year. They're either wildly off in their assumptions about themselves and how clean they are, or the number's somewhere in between because they're washing either a little bit themselves at home occasionally, or they're going to other car washes. So to give you an idea of the delta, it's somewhere probably between 3 and 10.6, okay? And it's going to vary, I'm sure, by all sorts of other factors as well. 24% of the Australian market is professional only, meaning they don't do it themselves. They've bought into what you're offering. 35% though are the DIY only. These aren't the great unwashed, but they almost might as well be to some degree. They're harder to budge, okay? This is a harder population to work with. They're incredibly, we'll see, price conscious. Also in here you have a lot of auto enthusiasts and hobbyists. No one's going to touch my baby, okay? So no matter almost what we do, it's going to be hard to get to those vehicles. But 35% identify themselves as I'll only do it myself. This next number here, this 4% receive online communications, this is a portion of our consumer study that we added a couple of years ago to get an idea of how well are we doing with marketing car washes. And I'll tell you, in every country in the world that we've looked at, we're horrible. So that 4%, I'm not going to spend time on it today, but what we are noticing compared to other retail businesses is just how much better we can do at reaching the consumer in all sorts of different channels. Awareness of unlimited programs, 6% of those who wash are aware of unlimited programs. This would be the flat monthly price washing. And then this is another new question we've asked recently. I'm going to come back to this theme a couple of times is, how well do consumers, how would consumers compare their favorite car wash to their favorite other type retail business? Okay, so we want to get an idea for what do people think about their car wash? Do they think of it as a 20-year-ago dark tunnel bay, unlit, unsafe, paint peeling kind of environment? Or do they think of it something that's more contemporary? Something that would be just like your favorite fast food restaurant or like a hair salon or a grocery store. So we've asked them to compare. In Australia, on average, and it varies by the type of wash they most frequently go to, but on average they rank car washes 8 of 10 compared to those other businesses. We'll get into that. And then finally is the satisfaction with price per wash. Extremely and very satisfied, only half. This is one of those numbers, my other caveat I'll give you for everything I say today is, if you ask customers if they want to pay more or less, what do you think they will say? I mean, so, you're never going to get to 100% satisfaction. If you have, you're probably doing something wrong with your business, okay? But when I talk about price in the context of this study, what I want you to think about is also value, perceived value and actual value, okay? As much as price, if not more. Okay, so that's a quick high level. Now let me walk through some of the specifics in here and talk about the different 4 focuses I've already mentioned of the study. First of all is this idea that 41% of Australian car washers, those who have washed, the 96%, 41% of them do both. I think it was Blair yesterday had something in his slides about the opportunity for just getting somebody to wash one more time. He had a couple of pro formas up on the screen, and that was one of his themes. This is an opportunity ripe for the car wash industry in Australia, is to go after those folks who are going back and forth, who are doing it sometimes themselves and doing it sometimes at a professional car wash. They already know about your service. They understand the proposition. The chance to move them over to become dedicated professional only is tremendous. It really stood out to us as an interesting opportunity. On value, again, we know that price, there's a high degree of self-declared price sensitivity. There's also a high declared sensitivity to convenience and speed. We hear that consistently from customers. They want both of those things. They will say that's why they come and why they come back. I would challenge in your reading of the data to say, yes, everyone wants it fast and cheap, but what can you do to do something like the bakery we saw yesterday, okay? You can have a strategy of being the cheapest. You probably can't afford to be always the most convenient. You can't build on every block. So what can you do outside of just price and convenience to make a difference? And keep that in mind as we go through some of these slides. On barriers, something that stood out to us in the Australian market was this idea that home washing does it better, 67%. So 2/3 of folks, this is of all folks who get car washes, still think doing it at home is a better quality job than visiting a professional car wash. So an opportunity. And then the differentiation, the convenience, self-declared, it's convenience why I go to one wash over the other, okay? All right, now, this is the same data just shown a little bit differently, is that this idea of the switchers, okay, so that's the group in the middle, the 41%, they do both themselves and professional. The other way to look at this would be to say to yourself that 65% of the market are already your customers, okay, so at least they're coming sometime. I would put those numbers together and say 2/3 are your professional washers of some level of frequency, the remainder don't do it at all. Sorry, do it DIY, excuse me. Also, let me make sure to clarify, and this is in the documents you can download at the end of the presentation. When the slides say pro, they'll also sometimes say all or non. That means of the population set. So pro would be those folks who say they most frequently wash at a professional car wash. That's how to read the data, okay? So of professional car washes, where do they go most often? You know, we see that this is certainly a rollover market in terms of self-declared, where they go most frequently. You could also, though, add together the tunnel components and say to yourself, 22% of the tunnels, okay, if you add together the full and the express, are the favorite of professional customers. And you can also add a component of the hand washes. I'll tell you, designing the surveys can be a little challenging to get a customer to identify what kind of car wash they went to. So is it a conveyorized wash? If it is hand washing on a conveyor, is it a hand wash? Is it a tunnel or is it a hand wash? And so our descriptions can be a little challenging, admittedly, for the customers to understand. Did I go to a conveyor or a hand? So I would say you can include some of the hand washing in there potentially as well. So rollover first, tunnels second. Jet, by the way, I don't think that term jet wash isn't used so much in Australia, right? That's actually a German term. I think that spit into the survey improperly. We're talking self-serve there. I know the description reads correctly to the consumer, so they filled it out properly, but jet is the wrong term for this slide. My apologies. Okay, so take a look here then at what the professional car washers agree with in terms of their motivators, whether they agree or disagree. The good news is, again, these are the folks who understand the premise already, that 86% of them see it as less work than washing at home. What's interesting here to us was, I was curious about the environmental factors. What we have found, I'll tell you, and this isn't addressed later on in the comparison to the US, so I'll mention it now. Environmental issues, how much water you use and where your effluent goes, is interesting to a lot of people. It doesn't beat price and convenience. I thought these might be a little bit higher. So they're resonant. What we have found is in a situation where, let's say you could turn left or turn right and go to two different car washes, the environmental one will be impactful if they know you're doing more to recycle, if they know you're using, let's say, green chemistry. But it's not going to beat out the other factors of convenience and price and speed, et cetera. Okay, 2/3 of these washers also, though, believe that washing at home costs less. Okay, so that's an education point, we think, that's an opportunity for the future. The better overall value, these are 67% disagree that the car wash is a better value, okay? So they're dissatisfied with the price in general, thematically. They think that car washing, professional car washing pricing, they're not satisfied with. And you see it bleed through here a little bit on the value question. So it's kind of the same data, the same themes asked to two different ways. One is on price and one is on the value. I think Robert mentioned this in his survey statistics from the US. The emotional reasons are consistently cited every year in every market as the reasons why folks get a car wash and what they enjoy about the car wash. You will see in there, I believe it's the second issue, the second item is protecting the value of your investment, sure, but at the end of the day, it's the human, it's the feelings of pride, it's the ego, it's the feel good of the experience that drives folks to visit car washes or more frequently. And so, you know, I think we'll get into the retail data we have. I think when you think about today's retail experiences and the emotion, we can do a better job of the industry in delivering on that. Okay, cleanliness is the greatest driver for why choosing a professional car wash. Perhaps no surprise there. They want to make sure it gets clean, of course. What I looked at that I thought was interesting on the flip side was a low preference level for whether or not there is a human greeter or you're interacting with a payment terminal. I'll tell you, in some markets, there's a high desire by customers to have a human there. They're not yet comfortable with the automated payment solutions. We don't see that in Australia, so not as much of an issue. By the way, I'll pause for a second. Any questions? I'm blowing through these pretty quick. All right, next one. Okay. Additional services. Okay, so here's one that stood out again also as interesting because it's different from other markets and maybe a potential opportunity. It's a two-part question here. One is, what do you value? And then again, importantly for the business owner, what can you charge more for? So where could you get incremental revenues? As you look at these, only one is over 50%, which is a wax or any kind of paint protectant you might put on the vehicle. But even so, if 51% of them want it, only 36% have purchased something like that. Now the question you might ask here is the mix of your packages. So what are you offering on your machine in terms of the entry point or the middle package or the top package? What can you do to raise awareness and talk about the importance of wax or paint? Maybe you can quantify that in some rational way about what that does to protect the investment of the vehicle, et cetera. But relatively, I would tell you, lower levels of interest in what I'll call ancillary services. You know, these are usually opportunities to upsell, improve ticket average, you know, add to overall profitability, relatively lower levels of interest in those, in any of these different services. Any of these terminologies not work? If you have questions about them, please let me know. Okay, environmental practices I mentioned before. I highlight this slide because I thought it was interesting. What is also unique to Australia compared to other markets that caught our attention was the environmental, while it will not cause a purchase decision over price and convenience, it is resonant more so than other places than the philanthropic involvement of the car wash, right? So if you're a community supporter, you do fundraisers, et cetera, less interest in that than the environmental message. So that tells us, you know, that the environmental message is not one to get away from. It's also one, of course, that is really dependent upon seasonality. It's really dependent upon where we are with rain patterns and whether it is dry or wet in a certain region. But typically we expect to see these numbers a little bit higher in other markets when it comes to philanthropy and involvement in fundraising. Okay, I mentioned before convenience. Again, convenience drives everything. You know, that obviously should inform your site selection. Robert mentioned earlier the idea of evaluating having a B site, let's say, versus an A site. This is why people pay more for an A location, a location that has more visibility, a location that has greater density of rooftops of homes, is because convenience is one of those prime drivers. Okay. Here is what I want to give you a second to digest, is this idea of the retail comparisons. As you look at that list, I think this is a theme that I'll come back to at the end on the idea of moving as an industry from being great car wash operators to being great retailers. And I think the industry grew up and in large measure continues to be about being a great operator. We don't have lots of examples of being great retailers. We're getting more of those examples every day, but it's a shift in thinking. So as we talk about the perceived value, okay, so how do you change the perceived value? You give more, or you can cut your price. You don't want to cut price to have the value match. So how do you give more at a car wash? Well, ancillary services. Well, if I don't want the ancillary services, what can I give? I can give more of a feeling. I can give more of that emotional delivery, creating a retail experience and environment that's attractive to customers. So there's an opportunity to move that number up so that we can get to where the grocery stores and the sit-down restaurants, we're more competitive from an aesthetic and an experience to those other businesses. Doug, time. I'm all right? Good, okay. Okay, I did mention before that there's a difference by car wash model on how people feel about their retail experience. No surprise, by the way, that those who go to a full-service car wash, and actually inside of this, those that go to hand car washes feel a little bit better about the retail experience because there's more of a chance for you to have a human interaction. They're in your cafe. They're in your environment longer than just a ride through or sitting in the bay. The reason why we ranked down to 8, by the way, is that's the total population of all visits, and this is most often. So it's a different slice of the data a bit. I just wanted to show you that the full service is, as you'd expect, performing better as a retail experience than the other models. Okay, now here's another interesting one, and I'm curious what the reactions might be to this. This is, oh, yes, Doug. 5, gotcha. This is going to be people's self-declared price per wash that they have paid. Full exterior rollover hand and self-service is the last one. You've all purchased more Australian car washes than me, so I can't tell you if these numbers are right or not, but that's what they think they're paying. Okay, let me skip ahead knowing I have 5 minutes or so. Dissatisfaction with price, this is a breakdown of where that is, and now it's a breakdown by model. So we talked about before, half of the market is dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the pricing. That bleeds through most significantly in the self-service and the exterior categories. Okay, so what are the potential opportunities if I had to summarize all this stuff? Number one is the idea of one more time. So getting those that both wash themselves and wash professionally over to your side, seeing the light, so to speak, huge opportunity. Getting pro-only people to wash one more time a year, big opportunity. The other is this move from being great operators to thinking about becoming great retailers. And then the fourth one is delight them on price, asterisk, delight them with value, right? Delight them in a way where they feel like they are getting more than they paid for, regardless of what that price point might be, is a real opportunity. Okay, I'll run through now just quickly the Australians versus the US. Everyone's got a little bit of competitive juices, I know, flowing. So let's just give you an idea of how this market compares other places. We've had studies. The Australians are significantly more likely to exclusively wash at home, more than twice of what we see in the United States. So you have a lot more of that do-it-myself here in Australia than we see in the US. On the frequency numbers, in the US we're seeing wash frequency be self-reported at almost 14 times per year, so more than once per month, about 30% roughly more wash cycles than we've had self-reported here in Australia. And the final one there, 5 times or 4 times the awareness of unlimited wash programs, which has been, in the US, probably the most significant and aggressively pursued marketing strategy in the country for the last 5 years. Monthly unlimited, monthly unlimited. That's been a driving force. No surprise the awareness is a little bit higher on that in the US. I mentioned before, online communications aren't great anywhere. On the retail, I will tell you, in the US, they rank their favorite car wash on average as a 5 out of 10. moving up a couple of places. We're not yet at the grocery stores, which is the #1 in the U.S., but thematically, in the middle, slightly ahead. Okay, lessons from the U.S. market. You can read those in the book. I'll tell you in general, it's matching to those summary points I made about Australia, the idea of value and price and looking at the monthly unlimited plan as all things that potentially might be lessons from the U.S. Here now is the European study. What's the difference there? Again, there's many more DIY here in Australia than Europe. In fact, Europe has the highest level of professional only. Hardcore, what you might call traditional mature market. They know they're professional only, they're not going to do it themselves. In certain parts of Germany, it's because they can't wash at home, which is awesome. We hadn't exactly gotten that to be a wildfire yet across the globe, but it'd be great if it did. But the European frequency on car washing is lower. In fact, I believe the Australians edge out the Europeans on self-declared wash frequency. They're at 10.5 is their number versus the 10.6 in Australia. Okay, lessons from the European market is roughly similar thematically, and then I'll just give you an idea what the three markets look like together. Here I mentioned to you is on the European side, the hardcore pro only, 81% of the market, they're not going to wash it themselves at all. Only 46% of Australians feel the same way. And the inverse of that would be the DIY most often at the very bottom. Half of Australia most often does it themselves, only 14% of Europe. When I say Europe, it's 6 countries, by the way, that we surveyed. All right, the difference in why the U.S. number is at the 13 versus Europe and Australia being at the 10 times is because the U.S. has a significantly higher population of high frequency washers. That's what drives the number, okay? So even though Europe has a larger percentage of professional customers, the U.S. number gets jacked up by the few times per month or once a week more often. That's what drives the 13 times number. And then you can see here by the areas of learning we identified at the beginning, what's the differences between the markets. The good news is this 96%, 95% in Europe of washing, that they wash their car. And that's, I think, the drumbeat we want to continue to bang. You can see the comparison on the ranking of the overall experience. Europe wins that battle. 3 out of 10. Sorry, the 3 out of 6 it says here. Actually, it's 3 out of 10. That's a typo. But in Europe, some of the aesthetics you see, some of the retail experiences you see, the look and the feel, the emotional benefits, the visual marketing, the visual architecture of the stores, much more resonant with the customers than we see in the US or Australia. All right, thank you. So here, for those of you who are present and awake, here's your URL, carwash.org/Australia. If you go to on your phone right now, there are 2 versions of the study. One's high definition that's good for printing, one's low def. You can download it onto your phone or look at it right now. And then again, if you'd like the full study, 220 pages, please go to Doug or Fiona, and I'm sure they're happy to share it with you. Doug, thank you very much.